Hello, everybody. Hello works because we have over 200 participants from across the globe from various time zones. Hello, it is, and thank you very much for your interest and joining us today this evening to learn about sustainable leadership from the Cornell SELP program. We have Professor Glen Dowell, who will be taking us through the subject this evening. But before that, let me give you a quick understanding of what the Cornell SELP program is all about. The SALP from Cornell is a leadership program for all you senior executive leaders out there who wish to upskill themselves and make your transformational journeys impactful. You shall be doing this program as a 10-month-long intensive program, which includes 2 weeks of in-class learning in our New York campus and Dubai. And we have 4 2-week comprehensive online modules that are spliced in between. That's how you will be learning this program. Our cohorts for the Cornell SELP have always been rich with individuals from diverse global backgrounds with incredible leadership journeys. The leadership lessons that they bring onto the classrooms are really enriching. So that is the kind of peer-oriented collaborative learning that you will be going through. And of course, you will be earning the certificate of completion from the Cornell University directly. Leadership was never meant to be written in a book. It could never be contained in a book in black and white. Never was, never could be, right? So how does one as a leader enhance, learn, and upskill? You do that by constantly adapting. You do that by constantly switching, by being progressive and learning from experts who can give you those valuable insights as to what is coming and how do you adapt. One such expert is Professor Glen Dowell in the field of sustainability. He is the Henrietta Johnson Lewis Professor of Management and the Senior Director for MBA and the MPS programs at the Johnson Graduate School of Management. He researches in the area of corporate sustainability with a focus on firm environmental performance. Amongst multiple publications, his works have been featured in the Management Science, Organizational Studies, Advances in Strategic Management Journal, to quote just a few. He is also on the editorial boards of Strategic Management Journal and the Administrative Science Quarterly, and represents Cornell on the board of Alliance for Research in Corporate Sustainability. We couldn't think of a better expert to handle today's subject, sustainable leadership. We are waiting to hear from you, Professor Glen. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'd like to hand over the mic to you.
Thank you, Ramya. Thank you to the entire team for allowing me this short time this morning here in Ithaca and this evening or late afternoon, wherever our participants are. It is my great pleasure to be here with you and to share a few thoughts about the issue that I would be really pleased and honored to get a chance to talk with the participants in greater depth if they're part of the program. In fact, I just finished doing a day a week and a half ago with the cohort that's going through the Senior Executive Leadership Program. I want to put sustainable in everything. So when I see S, I think sustainable. I just finished a day with executives from all over as part of the SELP. And it was a really amazing experience for me and a great chance to go through some of these issues in a really interactive and deep for the day we had format. It was a terrific group, very thoughtful, and we had a really, I think, you'd have to ask them, I guess, but I think we had a really good time. So what I want to talk about today, there's obviously, I've got a relatively short time to talk about an incredibly complicated subject. And I guess it's kind of a teaser, right? Here's the way I think about sustainability and sustainability and leadership in particular. And I hope you find it intriguing enough to join us for a longer period. But I want to talk about the implementation part. And so this isn't going to be a lecture on the business and climate change or business and pollution or all of these many issues of sustainability that you and your businesses, if you're not grappling with now, you will be. It's more about let's assume that there are some issues, and we'll talk, if we have a full day, we talk about how do you identify which issues to address. But let's assume you've got some issues that you have to address, and we'll talk about why you might need to do so, what's going on. And then I want to talk about, well, how do companies actually get this done? So let me just, I said it wasn't about this sort of what is sustainability, but I do want to put it in context in just a very brief way to give you a feel for what we think about at Johnson when we teach sustainability. And I should mention, in our regular MBA program, and indeed in our executive MBA programs, we have in-depth full courses on this, and we've been doing this for over 20 years at Johnson. And so it's something that we take really seriously, and that we consider ourselves to be at the forefront of thinking about business and sustainability. And so here's how we frame it. Let's imagine, and again, putting aside what that might be, but there are literally dozens of environmental or social issues that businesses need to think about, right? And then they've become much more concrete and salient to businesses all around the world over the last decade or so, right? So we've had many years of talk of sustainability, usually more from the government side or the UN side. And then the businesses have engaged with little pieces of it. But over the last few years, for a variety of reasons, we've had to become much more conversant in these issues and take them more seriously and do much more concrete actions to try to figure out how to reduce the impact that business has on the planet and on social systems. Or, as I'll talk about a little bit, even much more powerfully, to think about how to start to solve those problems. Right. So it's not so much just how do we do a little less bad? It's actually how do we fix some things, and how do we do it within what we do well as a business? So we just think about this. There's three kind of broad ways that businesses try to make things a little better. Right. The first is got nothing to do with the core business. So there's this issue of corporate social responsibility. And that's, you may have a foundation attached to a lot of large businesses, or you may just donate some of a tiny portion of profits or employee time to a cause you care about. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not related to how you actually make money as a business. It's just something that you do that's usually comes out of some executive's passion for a topic, right? So we see some large businesses, or even small ones. Actually, here in the community of Ithaca, we have many small and medium enterprises that donate to the arts in town to maintain a vibrant community of arts. That's a really great thing they do, and it makes the town better. But it isn't related to how they make money as a bank or as a restaurant. It's just it may help their image a little bit. But if they stopped it tomorrow, their operations would continue untouched. The second, and this has been very much in the news, really globally in the last few years, and certainly here in the United States, but even, again, talking with executives from all over the world, ESG is one of the first acronyms that they think of when we talk about sustainability. And ESG, of course, stands for environmental, social, and governance issues. And here, it is more related to your core business, but it's really about reducing risk to your shareholders. It's not about fixing problems per se. It's about doing a little less bad and making sure your shareholders aren't put at risk. So on the environmental side, it's making sure that you're not liable for some spill, right? So you would get a lower E score if you have greater chance of being sued or fined. And that's obviously reducing that chance is helping the environment to some degree, but it's not really solving problems. And it's not related necessarily to how you do business. But when you're thinking about how do we actually reduce what we'll call externalities, problems that businesses create through their economic activity, how do we reduce this while doing better as a business? That's what we're talking about. And that's what we work through in the session and in all the courses I teach. It's thinking about how do we think about innovation as a part of sustainability? How do we think about implementing it throughout the business, which is what I'm going to spend the next 15-ish minutes on today. Right? So that's the kind of piece that is really important here. Is it's not how do you do nice things, great to do, may help your image. It's not how do you just reduce risk for your shareholders without thinking about how you've maybe moved the needle a little bit, nudged some issues on really fixing problems and relating it to your core activities. That's what we're talking about, is relating it to your core activities. Well, how do we do that? Or sorry, before we even get into how we do it, let me talk about why that's becoming even more important. So ESG, again, huge topic over the last few years. ESG investing has grown globally, from a really niche activity to a giant piece of global investments. But there's really two problems with it. And from the people who care about the sustainability of the world, they realize ESG investing hasn't been doing very much, right? So you can be really good in an ESG fund, how do we see you as a company sense, and not be really improving the world very much. And then from the other side, we have the criticism that ESG is taking money out of the shareholders' hands because it's paying attention to these issues that aren't core to the business. And so we've seen, the left in the US here, we see the left say the ESG hasn't done enough and the right say it's doing too much. And the reality is that ESG was never intended to fix all the problems that the environmentalists are worried about. It was intended to reduce risk to shareholders. And so what we're seeing now, and the reason I'm doing this is because we're seeing CEOs and other company spokespeople talking about reducing the talk, on ESG. They're not mentioning that in their earnings calls or in their discussions with analysts. But what they're saying is we are actually working on environmental and social issues that show, as it says in this quote, real bottom line results and connects with performance. That's what we've been talking about at Cornell, as I said, for 20 years. Take care of the environmental and social issues that you are responsible for, and do it in a way that is consistent with how your business makes money, right? So they're saying there's a growing sense that ESG is a terrible term because it covers way too much. And you'll see a lot of CEOs try to unpack that term with a focus on specific, highly defensible, highly beneficial efforts that they're continuing to roll out. So why have I spent the first 6 minutes of my time with you on that? It's because this issue, whatever words get used to describe it, and whoever's talking about this issue, is only growing stronger. If you are in a company that sells, you're in a B2B firm that sells into a manufacturing or a brand here in the United States, this is going to continue to be something that's going to be under pressure. You're going to have to think about how to reduce impact. You'll be audited on it, and it's going to matter even more. And it will matter also in your own markets, in the way that the continued degradation of environmental issues and environmental performance, and the pressure on social systems. This will be an issue that will come up again and again. So the key is how to think about implementing sustainability within a company in a way that is consistent, logical, and will help the company do what it does well. So many corporate sustainability issues today, or efforts today, and this is true across the globe, are unfocused and haphazard. What do I mean by that? I mean that they often come about because of some immediate pressure that a company feels, or some passion that an executive has for a particular issue, without real thought to how they relate to how the company makes money or how they can be implemented properly, right? And how do I know this is true? Well, one is from talking to people in companies and asking them about how their sustainability efforts are going. Another is from looking at what companies are doing. So we see goals that are constantly being changed. If you look at companies' sustainability reports over a 10-year span, you'll see their goals change multiple times on a single issue, and then a lack of systematic approaches that thinking about how to structure a sustainability effort, how to think about how to motivate your employees to care about this. So a solution to that, and what we work through, and I think is especially the key in a senior executive leadership program is thinking about how to implement sustainability in a really cohesive and coherent way. And by the way, working through the framework and the kind of concepts that I talk through with my students it is angled towards sustainability, but that's not the only thing it helps with, because it's really showing you that sustainability in companies is a form of organizational change. And by getting better at organizational change, you can do better at implementing sustainability. So I think about these 4 issues here, which I'll talk about for really the remainder of the session. So we're going to think about what's driving it, what improvement means, how we're going to think about progress toward that improvement, and then how to actually build the structures around that progress. And again, I just said this, but if you're thinking about sustainability issues, you ask yourself if your organization is prepared for a change toward doing better in sustainability. And chances are very high, in fact, that the answer is no, that you don't have even thought about why you're doing it. You haven't thought about what success would look like. You haven't thought about whether the metrics that you would use to measure your progress towards success are going to be consistent with or conflict with other metrics in the organization. All these things will make a huge difference in how successfully you can implement any kind of change, and especially around sustainability. So the approach that I use and the framework that I've developed over years of teaching this and dealing with, doing executive education and talking to people in companies, talking to my former students, the alums that have gone out and have been working this, I use essentially this. It's a 4-stage model, and then this underlying this enabling and constraining factors, the context that you have to think about. So the first piece of this, I call it the MGMT model. So the first piece of this are the motives. And anytime you're undertaking a change, right, whether it's in your own personal life, you want to get healthier, you want to get fitter, etc. You should step back and say, and really ask yourself, what's really driving me to do this? And what are the pressures I'm feeling? Why do I care? And when you think about sustainability, the reason that you want to ask this is because there's really 2 broad reasons why companies start to undertake sustainability efforts. And the first of what we'll call a defensive reason, right? So I mentioned if you're selling to a company, if you're selling to Walmart, for example, Walmart is demanding of all of its suppliers that they do sustainability audits, that they show plans for reducing greenhouse gases, reducing other toxic chemicals, etc. And so you might be sitting there going, if we don't figure out how to do this, we'll lose that contract. That's a defensive reason, right? It's maintaining your license to operate, maintaining your legitimacy. There's nothing wrong with that as a reason, by the way. It's just you need to recognize that, because all of the rest of the implementation will follow. You could also be thinking, we see stronger regulations coming in, and if we don't do this, we're going to be at greater risk, or our costs are going up, or our insurance costs will go up, etc. So it's a risk reduction. That's one side, defensive. The other side is a more proactive, playing offense approach, where you see opportunities in a market, and you think, if we can, for example, sell a lower energy using piece of equipment into this market, where energy is becoming more expensive, where there's much more attention to carbon footprint, and carbon footprint is just a measure of use of energy, largely. If we can sell this lower, more efficient piece of equipment, and that's a huge market we can attach. Or we've got this process that will reduce the amount of water used in dyeing fabrics, and that is an opportunity to sell into new markets and displace current competitors. That's that's market development. The ultimate version of that in globally right now is Tesla, right? There's a massive market availability for an electric vehicle. That's an offensive approach, right? Proactive. So you think about, what am I really trying to do? And the reason you think about it first is because, twofold. One, that's what defines what success will look like. right? If you think you're doing this on a defensive way, like I am going to make sure that I maintain my ability to sell into these markets, then your goals are going to be around customer retention. They're going to be around costs reduction and risk reduction, et cetera. If you're thinking about a more proactive motive and you really identify that, then your goals are going to be around market development or new products launched, et cetera. And those are very different. Those filter down to the rest of the organization in very different ways. The second reason that it's important to identify your motives upfront and be honest about them is because you don't want to be, fooling yourselves and fooling others. If you announce, for example, if your real motive is around defensive, reducing your risk, but you announce it like you're really all about saving the world, internally and externally, people are going to know you're kidding yourself, right? Your employees aren't going to buy into that. They're not going to be following you if they hear you saying one thing and they know it's really something else. And you're also setting yourself up for failure and claims of greenwashing. So the next stage in this is then you set your goals. And your goals in this framework are it's really important that you set goals that are specific and measurable, and that they have to be time bound in a way that you can say, I know when I've met my goals. And too often with sustainability, again, go through a couple of companies' sustainability reports from any market in the world, and you'll see some very vague goals and goals that aren't really tied to anything that makes sense for the organization. They're just, we want to do better on this dimension. Well, no, if you don't know when you've met a goal, it's not very motivating, right? I want to feel healthier. I want to get better. I want to lose weight. Those aren't specific enough for me to know if I've succeeded. The same thing with a company. I want to reduce my greenhouse gas emissions. By how much, by when? Because those also then help you identify metrics that you can use to hold people accountable in the organization. Metrics around, maybe you've got 20 products in your product line, so you could develop different metrics for different products to reduce, again, think about greenhouse gas emissions or toxic emissions. You can think about process metrics. What do we need to invest in our research and development, or what do we need to invest in our marketing in order to make this work? Those aren't specific, investment in marketing is a process that will help you reach your outcomes. And then finally, in terms of implementation in the model is how do you organize around this? And here you've got to think about what are the actual things we need our people to do. If we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, what do we actually need them to do? We need to do carbon footprinting of our products or services. We need to do some sort of discussion and audits of our own suppliers. We need to be able to understand the science behind this, and we need to have conversations with outsiders to make sure we're doing this right. So those are the actual tasks. Then we have to think about where should we structure that? How do we structure this? Do we have a sustainability sit within each product? Are we a very product division run organization, and each product, they have complete ownership of all the processes, and we need sustainability to sit that way? Should we have a sustainability team at headquarters that helps share knowledge across all of them? And they're really where the sustainability knowledge sits, and they're sort of an internal consultancy team. What's the right structure? What kind of rewards should we offer here? How much should we include this in our executives' bonuses? Should we include this in employee bonuses? And do we have the right people in place in the first place, right? If we think about the transition to electric vehicles that is happening in all of the major auto manufacturers, think about the way they have to invest in their workforce. And they have to both upskill current employees and then add a lot more people with software and firmware knowledge in order to make this work, because electric vehicles are essentially iPhones on wheels. And so the same people who can design an engine and think about the architecture of an internal combustion engine car aren't going to necessarily get you there on an electric vehicle. So you have to think about the people. And then finally, you have to think about the culture. What do people care about in this organization? And how do we make our sustainability efforts fit that culture? If you're in an organization that is really all around efficiency and risk reduction, then your sustainability efforts should speak to that culture. If you're in a risk-taking organization, then you want to think about, you're in an organization that values innovation, values making real changes. then you want to think about how do you think about your sustainability efforts, that because culture is incredibly hard and slow to change. And then finally, and I know I'm just about out of time here for this evening for you. We also would think about the context. What other things do we need to consider? What kind of complements might we need to make this work? What are the competitors' actions that might affect this? How is regulation going likely to change? What's our best bet on what will happen in all these? Because these contextual factors will really matter for how we consider sustainability. So I want to actually, I know some of you had sent in questions beforehand, so I'd like, I think we've got about 5 minutes left. And if Ramya wants to come back on, I could talk about a couple of them that I pulled out, or you can just ask me questions as I think we'd intended, whichever works better for you.
Sure, Professor. Thank you for bringing me back in. That was indeed thought-provoking, the MGMT model. All I know is we've just about managed to scratch the surface, and to get to understanding this topic and to go through your sessions, that's the best way to learn this better.
Oh, for sure. And in my session, I get people to think about their own organization, right? It's not a bunch of lectures about how other companies have done this. I bring in examples, but it's really, let's wrestle with this for your own organization and tell me about what you're doing in this space. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So I have a few questions from our participants. Sure. Arvind would like to know, can we synchronize the environmental implementation plan in ESG or sustainability reporting?
Oh, yeah. So great question. So in implementation plan, absolutely. If I go back here, actually, often when you think about the goals part and the metrics, those would be both in terms of what I'm trying to do as a sustainability strategy, right? I want to reduce these impacts, and I want to, sell products that are going to help mitigate climate change. But they would also then be, how do I think about how I'm seen by the outside world? And that's part of the ESG. I mean, ESG is really about how do one particular group of stakeholders, your shareholders, see you. And so you would hopefully, as you're improving and thinking about your goals and metrics on a sustainability effort, you'd also think, well, one external manifestation of that is I should do better on ESG ratings. What I was trying to say at the beginning is the ESG ratings themselves shouldn't be the goal because they're so flawed. And that I do spend a little time talking about how flawed they are when we get together. I don't want to spend the entire day on it, but you're muted, Ramya. We haven't had a real Zoom session until someone's been muted. That's the, now it's official.
Thank you, Professor, and apologies for that. So Edwin Martnow has a very specific question about the agribusiness sector. Yeah. Why he wants to know, how do you establish KPIs on sustainability in this particular sector?
Great. Well, I should say I'm Cornell is probably most famous for its amazing agriculture, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and all the work it's done globally. And I come from a farm, so I have a great affinity for the agribusiness sector. That doesn't mean I consider myself an expert in it by any stretch, but I would say two things. One, with agribusiness, first of all, there may not be a more important sector to consider these issues, because as we already are seeing in so many places around the world, that climate change is having an impact on yields. It's having an impact on the specific crops that can be planted and the varietals, right? I come from Canada, and we're seeing varieties of wheat being grown in Canada that never could have been grown before, which you say, oh, that sounds great, but it's also accompanied by less predictable weather patterns and all these other issues. So the issue of implementing this in the agribusiness sector and developing KPIs is, I think all of these, this whole model is meant to be specifically applied within your context. And so in agribusiness, you're going to, again, think about agribusiness is such a large sector. I want to be careful here, right? You could be in all sorts of ag. You could be producing farm equipment. You could be in the food processing and call yourself agribusiness. So wherever you are in this, you want to think about what are the real challenges that I'm facing. Is it stability of my stability of the inputs, right? Is my supply chain going to be something that I can count on? And maybe your motive is to ensure a stable supply chain. Is really your motive, right? That's a pretty defensive one. And then you think about, well, what are the goals for that? Well, I can think about maintaining these inputs at this cost. Then what would I do to get to there? And so you start to think, you build it out from that original motive. It could also be in the agribusiness, like I'm getting pressure to produce in a more sustainable manner myself. Maybe you're in the farm sector. And then you would think around reduction of input of some chemical inputs that are under pressure or certifications. So you think about it, all of these, for all of our participants thinking about this, the starting point is always, what is my context? What are the pressures I'm under in my business, or what are the challenges, or what can my business do to relieve pressures for others? Oh, looks like
Thank
we're
you.
About out of time. I don't want to.
Yes, I just thought I'll take one last quick question, because that's resonating with what you have put up on the screen too, where Maryland asks, how to sustain a leadership in a heterogeneous society with different levels of education. So that I thought I would just take that up, because that's you've already captured that in your screen as well. So if you would like to answer that, Professor.
So that's a big question everywhere. I want to say, I understand where many of the participants here are coming from and what they mean by, heterogeneous society with various levels of education. What I would say is, I'm speaking to you from a heterogeneous society with varied levels of concern for these issues. So if you think, the United States is a really fascinating place with it's not one place by any stretch. It's dozens and dozens of very different cultures all kind of rolled into one country. And what we've actually found is that, that to get people engaged in sustainability is really learning about what matters to them. And what matters is in some parts it may be around clean water and clean air and prospects for their own families and children, right? And that's how you get people to think about these issues. In terms of your specific question, in some parts of the US, it may be about national security, right? So how do we think about energy security and switching to clean energy where we're less dependent upon foreign markets for energy is another way to think about it. And that speaks to a very different group of people. I think for your more specific question is, do you need to have a certain level of education to engage with this? And the answer is absolutely not. If you're thinking, we've seen new technologies and new sustainability approaches work in very remote parts of the world, and with people who have are completely illiterate in the sense that we measure it here in the Western world, at least. And the reason it works is because you speak again you think about what matters to them, right? So earning a reasonable living for their families, and how do they want to do that? And then how do you actually engage them in the conversations? And so that's all part of that last stage on tactics is, what is my workforce? What are the capacities and the motivations of the people who work for me? And then how do I build this to make sure that I'm able to engage with people of varying capacities and motivations? And that's so the first step is actually, the question you ask is the first step, is recognizing that not everybody is starting from the same position here.
Thank you so much, Professor. I mean, we could go on, and I could personally go on with this session, but for paucity of time, I think more about this in your classrooms. And I wish to thank you once again for joining us in this session and for sharing such valuable insights with us, Professor Glen. And to all of you who have participated in this webinar today, I thank you for your time. And just wanted to give you a quick reminder that we are edging towards our upcoming deadline on the 31st of October for the next Cornell SELP cohort. So do it right and do it soon. So get started with your applications, and our team is right here to help you should you require any further information or support with the whole process. With that, I'd like to draw the curtains on this session. Once again, thanking you, Professor Glenn, and
Thank you.
looking forward to more such engagements in the coming future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll maybe see some of the people on this webinar in on Roosevelt Island next October. That's so take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.